What's up, you diehards, you degenerates, you lovers of defensive football? This is Josh Raymer, and we are back with another episode of the Big Three IDP podcast. And I'm joined in the Sode Shack and in StreamYard by two fellow degenerates, one of whom is about to get murdered. It's Adam Markham and Bobby Reynolds. Bobo, how are you, man? I'll go to you first. How are you?
I'm doing real good, Josh.
Eating a banana right now. Sorry, didn't realize you were mid-bite. Addy,
Hey, got a good heart, Bobby. How's that nanner treating you?
Yeah, it's keeping his heart pumping.
That's right. That's it. That's all we have time for him some days as dads. It's just sustenance.
That's right. Just get it in you.
That's why Adam eats most of his dinners at 9:30 when he comes into the Sode Shack.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, some good food talk to start off the pod, boys. Some good nutrition talk. So we have a great episode for you all today. We teased it last week, even though Addy completely whiffed on the tease that we did.
Oops.
But in your defense, you were getting your dog.
Sure.
So, and also you don't listen to the pod
Right.
as we actually record it.
Right.
So,
I never listen to you. Even when we're doing this,
that's right.
I'm just waiting on what I'm going to say next.
That's right. The hamster wheel is turning. You just hear the as it's going. So this is going to be a fun show, gentlemen. We've got the one and only Tom Kislingbury from Dynasty League Football and the Read and React podcast is going to be joining us on the show. We talk about all sorts of stuff, sort of the big picture coronavirus issues, how that affects your fantasy football strategy. We talked IDP players that he's targeting and rookies. It's going to be a lot of fun, so we're not going to dilly-dally too long here, fellas, but we do have some very exciting announcements that we wanted to touch on, Addy. Some big things that we are ready to share with our beloved listeners. So, first thing we'll remind you about, Addy, we've got these amazing T-shirts. That's not your Big Three T-shirt, Adam. Stop shaking it in the camera.
Imagine if it was there.
Yeah, if it was your shirt. So, the Big Three IDP T-shirts, very soft, very nice, and we are running the giveaway right now. Just send us a screenshot of your review on Apple Podcasts, or send us a screenshot of you recommending the pod to someone, and you'll get a couple entries for the shirt. We're going to give away a shirt.
Yeah. Free shirt.
It's a free shirt once the season kicks off.
We'll get a pic of that out this week, too. I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
if
a
people
good
have seen that very much.
It's a good-looking shirt.
If you want us to all sign it, we can do that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's ship it to our house and then pay to ship it somewhere else, Addy. That sounds great. I love
It's a good
that.
idea, me.
Yeah. So, and if you want to buy a shirt, just go to our website, Big 3 IDP. There's a merch tab. You can see all the cool stuff we have.
Ship it to us. We'll sign them. We'll send them back to you.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what they want is three bros signatures on this shirt that they're going to wear. So check that out. Go leave us a review. It's really helpful. It helps us out getting discovered when people are looking for IDP podcasts. So help us out, Eddie. That's the least we ask.
Sure.
And then we also have an update on the Big Three Network. So Joey's Pod, the IDP update, dropped its first episode this week. You'll want to check that out. He is looking at bounce back candidates for 2020. We have another pod that is in the works from Joe Redeman called Deep League Diving. I'm very excited about this. We'll be recording its first episode here very soon. This is about who are those guys on your taxi squads? The practice squads of the NFL teams, the guys at number 54 on your 55-man roster.
What's their deal?
Yeah, what's going on with them? And this is the season where we want to go deep league diving, Addy, because those guys may end up being weekly starters by the time 2020 is over. So check that out. We also have 3 or 4. I can't even keep track anymore. It's hard. But we have 3 other pods in the works that should be debuting very soon.
They're just people just beating the door down to get on this network with us.
That's right, Addy. That's right. So make sure to stay tuned. We have the Big Three Network Twitter handle that will be sharing all of those pods as they drop their first episodes. So we also have some big news that we've been looking forward to sharing for a while. We have decided on our recording schedule for this fall, and Addy will be adding some familiar faces to the rotation. So the way we're going to break it down, we're going to have the Sunday night recap pod that will record during halftime of the Sunday night game. So that will drop late on Sunday night. We're going to try to keep it, keyword try, to 45 minutes to an hour, just recapping what we've seen on Sunday. And my brother Connor, a.k.a. Connie, will be joining us for the recap pod. It's going to be a lot of fun. He's joining his first IDP league this fall, so we're going to get him into that IDP world. And then it'll be the 3 of us for the Thursday evening show where we preview the upcoming slate. So that's how we're going to kind of structure it this year. Recap, preview, we'll see. We may make it 3 weeks and want to blow our brains out and just go back to one show
Yeah.
occasionally.
And your boy's adding a DFS pod.
That's right.
So-
With Johnny the Greek. You and Johnny are going to be doing
that's breaking news there.
breaking news.
First
One
time.
of the 3 pods that we were talking about. You guys have a DFS pod that will be dropping Thursday night as well. You guys will record right after we get done recording the Big 3. So, but that's not all we have cooking for this season. There's more, Eddie. There's more. So on Saturdays, we are doing something extra special this year. Our very own medical expert, Lee Andrews, a.k.a. Dr. Leesus himself, will be doing a quick rundown of Friday's injury reports and telling you, the listeners, which fantasy-relevant guys will be impacted most by their injury. And this will be free in our regular podcast feed. Bobby, can you believe it?
Oh, I truly can't. Dr. Leesus, I am so excited to hear what you have to say for our listeners.
Yeah, Dr. Leesus, if you go back and listen to the draft recap pod, he was on there with us and Mike doing, I believe, the defensive side, and then you two and Ben did the offensive side, right?
Bright kid.
Very
bright kid.
Bright future ahead, both in life and in fantasy
He's
football.
been on the front lines
He has.
with this COVID stuff.
That's right. He's studying for some big medical exam he has coming up. He's been fighting COVID, and he's been playing golf. That's pretty much been his life. But by the time football season rolls around, he'll be doing this Saturday morning injury podcast. So we're going to try our best to get you prepared to dominate in a year when injury and turnover and illness is going to be, unfortunately, more prevalent than ever. So look forward to it. Lee and Connie joining the mix for the Sunday recap show, the Thursday preview show, and the Saturday medical injury show. So look forward to that. And next week, Addy, we have one of our favorites coming back to the pod. I'm kind of surprised we honestly did not scare him off. This is Kyle Borgononi of the Fantasy Footballers, the editor-in-chief, and the new host of their DFS podcast, is going to be coming back to catch up with the Big 3.
Oh, competition now.
That's right. You and Johnny's competition. We may have to try to see if we can
size him up.
Yeah, see what's going on with that. I am excited. Kai Borg is going to talk to us about his first ever IDP draft, which we just wrapped here not too long ago in the listener league that we have on the Sleeper platform. So we'll talk to Kai Borg about his first IDP draft. And
our redraft rankings, those are out now.
That's right.
We got to touch on that.
So we'll touch on the redraft ranks as well. And then we'll be breaking down the NFC South. Kyle is an Atlanta Falcons fan, so he'll be helping us go through that divisional preview. That will be dropping late Thursday night, so look forward to that. One of our favorites coming back, Addy.
Can't wait.
Should be a lot of fun. All right, Bobo, you think we should get into it here?
I think we shall.
All right, we'll let you finish that banana. And thanks again to everyone who has been listening. And, like Addy said, go check out big3idp.com. We just dropped those redraft ranks. Got a lot of cool stuff coming up. But for right now, let's jump over to the 3 of us and Tom Kislingbury talking football. Take it away, fellas. All right, we're back, and we are very excited to welcome into the virtual Sode Shack one of our favorite IDP follows on Twitter. He's dancing right now because he's so excited to be with 3 Kentucky boys as a proper English gentleman. This is the guy, gentlemen, who helped kind of launch the Big 3 IDP podcast when we got started, gave us the retweet that kind of shot this rocket ship off. So we're forever grateful to the man, the myth, the legend. You know him from Dynasty League football and the Read and React podcast. It's Tom Kislingbury. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That is way, way, way too kind. So I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint all of your wonderfully educated and excited and brilliant listeners now with some fairly tepid takes. So sorry in advance.
Well, we had our listeners, our last episode, we tried to mix it up and do window to the wall, which was basically ceiling and floor. And our listeners were suggesting Mountain Dew flavors for the ceiling and the floor. So no, we did not have educated listeners. We know what we're getting into, and that's what we love about them. We love our listeners, but they're a unique breed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've helped me out with the time zone, of course. I'm a few hours ahead. So over here, it's evening time. The sun has gone down, and I've got some horrible beer on the go. So
there you go.
Thank you very much for making time in your afternoon. The takes will get worse, I promise.
Yeah, that's how Adam usually mixes Monster and beer.
Yeah.
So he's simultaneously yelling or like kind of
Right.
low energy and kind of cool.
Yeah, normally I'd be drinking with you, but I don't know. I got to go to a birthday party at 5. I don't want to show up smelling like beer.
You should definitely be drinking then. What are you doing?
It's my niece and nephew. I don't need to do that. So, but yeah.
Oh, man. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, Tom. We've got a lot to talk about. The NFL season has officially kicked off. Teams are reporting for training camp. Unlike past years, it's not necessarily the most exciting thing as far as like TV coverage or news. Mainly a lot of coronavirus testing right now. There's going to be some physicals and some workouts to kind of get these guys in shape, some conditioning work. But we do have some stuff to talk about, and we're really excited to have you on. The co-host of Read and React. You guys have been doing that pod. You and Adam have been doing that pod for a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, I think 3 years. I mean, we don't record it every week because just finding time is super hard. Adam's got a little baby girl, so it's fairly difficult making it work on a weekly basis. But yeah, it's brilliant fun. It's lovely having a podcast. I really started listening to football podcasts sort of 4 or 5 years ago, something like that, and it was draft season, and I was training for a marathon at the time, so I was running a lot and listening to a lot of podcasts, and sort of fell in love with them then. And then I got the opportunity to pick up the Read and React after the original host sort of fell apart, and it's just been brilliant fun. Sticky is just such a good dude, my footballing brother, and we have a brilliant time, so we are just grateful for the chance that anybody listens at all and cares what we say.
That's right. And it is nice when you're trying to put out a semi-regular podcast to actually have something to talk about. So we're going to hit on some of the news here right off the top, but we're going to get into some larger kind of macro viewpoint discussions because there's not a whole lot of news to really dig into, but also because this football season is going to look different than anything we've ever done, anything we've ever seen before. So we're going to touch on that as well. But Tom, let's start here. The opt-out. This is something that is brand new for 2020. Players who have concerns over, participating in this NFL season have the option to opt out, to not play in 2020. There's 2 different tiers, depending on if you have some medical issues going on that make you higher risk. And we've seen some big names opt out. Devin Funchess, Damian Williams, Nate Solder, Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, and just before we got on mic, and we've got to talk about it, CJ Mosley, the linebacker for the New York Jets, opted out for this season. We'll get into kind of the implications of football in this kind of coronavirus world, Tom, but I want your kind of instant reaction here. What does Mosley opting out mean for the Jets linebacking core?
It's a bit of a mess, isn't it? I mean, the Jets are really interesting anyway because they had poor talent last year, but it was a really good defense, top 15 defense, and that's sort of a tribute to Greg Williams, who is a terrible human being. We have to say that for the whole bounty thing, but a fantastic coach. He continues to put out good coaches. He made Alec Ogletree look good at linebacker. So I look at that unit now, and I'd love to hear your point of view. I think Avery Williamson's by far the best linebacker in that unit now. He is accomplished. He is a good player. Now, it doesn't mean he will be the best at the end of the season because Blake Cashman's got a ton of talent, right? He sort of didn't flash it last year. He was out on the field and he did all right. And he piled up some tackles. I thought he got picked on a little bit. But he's a rookie. He's a rookie linebacker and not a high round pick. He came in with talent and athletics, but also some big problems. So hopefully he can develop. He can turn into a good player this year. And then after that, you've got Neville Hewitt, James Burgess, and Patrick Onwuasor. And I'd look at them and go, they're just guys. They could be not make the team. They could be cut. They could be starting. I've got no idea, but I'm not a big fan of those. So knowing Greg Williams' history, he tends to pick 2 inside linebackers and just give them all the snaps. He's not a rotator. He keeps them out there whenever he possibly can. So whoever wins those 2 jobs, I feel relatively comfortable, or I would do in a normal year, that they're going to deliver probably top 30 linebacker seasons. This year, I don't think it's going to be easy for anyone to play 900 snaps and stay healthy all year. I think everyone's got this random chance that we cannot predict in any way of just getting ill and missing 3 weeks straight away. Mm-hmm. So I think everyone on that list, those 5 players will probably start games, but I'm looking at Williamson and Cashman and thinking good chance to be top 24 linebackers. How are you guys thinking? There's a lot of people that sort of think James Burgess and Neville Hewitt or Patrick Onwuasor are good. Are you those guys? I'd love to hear the case made.
No, I mean, Burgess was definitely usable last year for IDP, just because the opportunity was there.
By default, right?
Yeah, by default. Someone has to get in there and get the snaps. I think I'm probably obviously more interested in Williamson coming off the ACL. Happened in preseason last year. He should be good. I haven't heard any reports to the contrary that he's not recovering well from that injury. So, yeah, Williamson. I don't think I'm really interested in any of the other guys at this point right now. I think I'd rather take my shot on other teams and maybe see if I can grab one of these guys off waivers if one of them gets the opportunity or due to injury or just they earn the job. Addy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Williamson's going to be my number one target. Smart on them for not cutting him. I know we all thought that was maybe going to be something that they could do because of the, he's owed quite a bit of money. I think $6 million per year is what he's making. But so he's my first target. I don't mind Neville Hewitt. I mean, he played really well last year when he got opportunity. Blake Cashman, he's also coming off an ACL, right? And it was a little more later into the year. But he was
he got hurt week 8 or something like that, and then didn't play after that. So because none of us wanted to watch the Jets last year because that was no fun. I think we've sort of forgotten a lot of what happened.
Yeah, he was torn labrum and a fractured shoulder.
Okay,
that's that was on Halloween. That story came out.
I mean, they brought Hewitt back for I think $2 million. So I think that it's probably going to be Williamson and Hewitt to start out. But yeah, I think once Cashman maybe gets proves that he's healthy and okay and trusts that knee, I think we could see him sprinkled in. But I mean, all those guys are going to be on my radar. You know,
they should be, because there was production to be had. There were points to be had with this Jets linebacking core last year,
and no more Jamal Adams.
That's right, that's true. So the Adams tackles. I think does this Bobby any more interest now in Bradley McDougald? Is he a winner in your mind?
I mean, you kind of have to be interested in this point, because surely Greg Williams knew about the possible opt-out from C.J. Mosley before the Jamal Adams trade. Maybe that's possibly something that they had a discussion about because, you're obviously losing a ton of tackles, possibly in C.J. Mosley. I know it's been 2 years since he was actually on an NFL field. But moving Jamal Adams for Bradley McDougald is fine for 2020. I know they got a lot of picks back if that can actually work out, but it just sucks for the Jets. They were 7-9 last year, which is kind of sneaky interesting.
I cannot believe they won 7 games. That was the most surprising stat that I heard from last season.
It's so bizarre. But, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to hear from Tom on the Ashton Davis take. I'm moderately interested in Ashton Davis. It's kind of a later rookie sleeper there. But I think Bradley McDougald is probably the guy that will play a little bit more in the box because of Adams being gone.
Yeah, the way I see it, I think Greg Williams' system is a clear strong safety, free safety split, but the strong safety is not, box banger like Ronnie Harrison, or it used to be, 15 years ago. It is a guy who is often put over the tight end. So they end up playing in the slot a lot. I think Jamal Adams clearly did that. He was fantastic in the slot. He was coming out from LSU. I think McDougald can do that. He didn't do it so much last year because of the way the Seahawks set up, but I've seen him do it before. I think he'll do that. And then, the way I see it is that free safety, that single high job is going to be a tussle all year long between Marcus May and Ashton Davis. Marcus May is a good player. He's certainly an acceptable NFL starter. He's a top 64 safety in the league. But it appears the Jets brain trust, in their infinite wisdom, there's a lot of sarcasm there because they're clearly terrible at their jobs.
Very bad. Very, very bad.
Well, sorry, I'm going to go slightly off topic. I tend to side with the fact that NFL coaches and front office are actually way smarter than any of us lot sitting at home in Twitter going, you lot are idiots, and they understand football at a deeper level most of the time. And then sometimes you look at teams like this and go, what are you doing? So who knows? Maybe they're clever. Maybe they actually are stupid. Don't know. But they tried to trade Marcus May. They seem to be trying to annoy him. And I think Ashton Davis looks like a deep safety. He was a hurdler, right, in college. A fantastic sprinter. So he's got the range. He's got the movement. The way I saw him was he quite likes contact and he throws himself in as well, but he's not a very good tackler. He's a high energy, wants to tackler, not a form tackler. So I don't see him playing much in the box. I think he'll probably get a chance to play deep, and I would expect, probably 500 or 600 snaps for both those guys this year, and then Ashton Davis to own the role from 2021.
Let's stay on the
dynasty piece for sure.
Let's stay on the safety topic for 1 second. And, shout out to Tom for his most recent tweet of, projections this year are going to be bad. Everybody's are, just because of the whole COVID thing and the possible opt-out. It's going to make it difficult to predict anything. But where has Jamal Adams possibly moved in your ranks just from the trade last week, Tom? I've tried to analyze myself whether I like him or not, more or less now that he's in Seattle. But, where do you kind of see him shaking out? I'm sure he's maybe top 5 probably still for you.
Yeah, I've actually got him 6 or 7 at the moment. So very near, and it's safety, right? The variance on safety is crazy. If anybody's thinking about investing a lot of money in Jamal Adams or any other safety, look back at your favorite league and look at the top 12 safeties last year and the year before and the year before that, and you will go, oh my god, it changes so quickly. There's like 6 guys year to year every year, and 6 new guys. So it's incredible. Now Jamal Adams is clearly a fantastic player, but he doesn't. I don't think he's going to have that role that makes me think he's going to pile up the massive numbers. So I like him. And the way I always talk about safety is you sort of got a tier of 5, 6, 7, 8 players, something like that, who are really good safeties, who you can feel confident are going to finish top 12. And after that, the next tier from about 9 down to about 30 is just one group of people. And whoever gets the most lucky interceptions or a big sack here or there, or a fumble recovery that goes for a touchdown, something like that, are going to look great. So I think Jamal Adams is in that top tier. But he's at the moment down towards the bottom end of it for me. That doesn't mean he can't be the overall top safety by any stretch of imagination, but I'm probably taking the other 5 or 6 guys before him.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, who was the last Seahawks safety? I know we had, obviously, Earl Thomas was there, but
Chancellor.
Has there been just a stud standout, like top 5 Seahawks safety in like recent memory for IDP?
Well, McDougald is sort of underrated, right? He's been underrated his whole career. He was really good that year in Tampa, and I think his last year in Tampa he wasn't very good. Can't remember, but off the top of my head, I think he had 1 down year. Then he went to Seattle, and his first year was really good, but nobody believed in him. And then he's sort of just been, a top 24 guy, but nobody ever gets excited about Brad McDougald.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think he's in a nice situation, though, now with especially Mosley going down. I mean, that's probably the biggest winner for me. The one that I'm going to be looking at the most is McDougald and Williamson, too. But the injury gives me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, and I know we do talk. We do. The Jets have proven to be kind of dumb the last few years, but well done on that trade. I mean, getting 2 first and another serviceable safety. That's pretty good.
That's like Khalil Mack, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, there's only been a handful of guys that have gotten 2 first-round picks back. So
that's nice.
Yeah, good on them for getting a hefty return there.
And a non-premium position as well. All the other guys that have gone for 2 first rounds have been pass rushers, corners.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I love that value too, Tom, on Adams, because if you're really looking at it fantasy-wise, Adams was probably a good sale at the end of last year just because obviously no C.J. Mosley or Avery Williamson in front of him, and now you put Bobby Wagner, K.J. Wright, our upcoming rookie possibly in I can't even think of his name now, Brooks. Yeah. So you put some very good linebackers in front of him this year. Fantasy-wise, maybe I don't know if he's a good buy right now, but he was a good sale at one point towards the end of last year. I don't know. How old is Adams?
He's still young.
Yeah, I think he's 25. I think he's still 25. Yeah, maybe even 24, something like that.
Hey, another question too. How old is C.J. Mosley?
He's probably up there at this
28.
Point.
Yeah, I'm 28. That feels like a good bet. Who's going to look it up?
28 years old. Yep.
Wow. Huh.
So well, that makes me feel old.
I'm going to look up his contract too to see, because we know that Adam Gase in his infinite wisdom was not a big fan of the Mosley and Le'Veon Bell contract. So
that's where I was going with that.
If they have an easy out after this year, I have to imagine this may be it for CJ Mosley in New York.
The Jets. The Jets are such a mess.
And that's something too, Tom. Like you were talking about these, I think it's true that most head coaches and GMs are smart people who understand the sport, but they also have to deal with the relationship side. And that's the side as fans and analysts that we never get to see. There's the implications of that, like Thomas Davis following Ron Rivera to Washington. That's one side of it. Another side of it is sometimes these guys get shipped out the door because they're a pain in the ass and the coach or the GM doesn't want to deal with them anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think that too is part of the equation that maybe we don't think about is the human element. You'd like to think that they could separate that and just keep it business only. But I don't know. I don't like working with people who are jerks or who are, distractions or taking away from the overall team. So I get it sometimes. And I think we see that pop up. Adam Gase is a particularly bad, habit of letting his feelings be known for guys that he does not like.
Yeah, well, that's the other side of it as well, is that players talk. Players all know each other because they move around so fast as well. And some of this is rumor; it's all hearsay. I don't know Adam Gase, but all I've heard from his 4 years as a head coach is him calling out players and falling out with people. And we've had a bunch of players that have gone public and say, "I do not want to work with that man. I don't want to be on his team. Get me out of here." And if I was a big name player and I'm thinking about taking a contract in the Jets, I'm going to phone my mates, right? And from what we know about Gase, those friends are probably going to say, think twice about signing for him.
Yeah.
So
and he also
I don't think he lasts the end of this year.
Yeah, I hope you're right. And he also doesn't put people in, the best positions. It seems like everyone that goes, like Le'Veon goes there and he has his worst career, his worst year of his career. Robbie Anderson wasn't really used properly.
Well, and look at the people who have escaped Adam Gase's orbit. We've talked about this before. You see Devontae Parker finally has the breakout.
Yeah.
Kenyon Drake finally has the breakout. Ryan Tannehill finally has the breakout. All when they got out of the Adam Gase orbit. So I think he's just a black hole for talent. And as much as I am excited for some of these Jets pieces like Mims and, Darnold and Lev Bell to a certain extent and Herndon and all these guys, it's tainted by the fact that Gase is still there. And it may be 2021 before we see these assets start to really reach their true potential, unfortunately.
Those damn Adams.
That's right. They're the worst.
I think it is good news for whoever takes over, though. So my personal theory for head coaches is that owners tend to go for the opposite. So they hired Adam Gase. So go back to the previous coach, right? You got Todd Bowles, an old grizzled defensive veteran. So they canned him, and they basically go for the opposites. They go, we need a young guy who is an offensive coach, and we'll get him in. And once they get rid of Gase because they realize he can't run a good offense, then they're going to go, right, I need a veteran who's really got the respect of the league, and it's going to be an old defensive guy, and it's going to be John Fox or Wade Phillips or someone like that takes over the Jets, and that will go horribly wrong as well.
Yeah, it really is a pendulum. It swings from offense or, older defensive grizzle. It seems like all the defensive coaches have to wait longer. They have to be the old grizzled guys like Vic Fangio to get their head coaching opportunity. Chuck Pagano, another example. But yeah, it's always the young, sexy offensive hire, right? And it tends to swing the pendulum back and forth with every hire. Or you see these kind of like the kind of outlier is like the Matt Rhule college coach coming to the NFL, and they're hoping to, kind of mix things up, revitalize, take it in a totally fresh direction, see how it goes. That's one team I'm very interested in, with no preseason, no real game contact until we get into week one. That's a whole new team.
Ton of rookies on defense. That will be interesting.
Yes. So it'll be a fun team to watch. I don't think it'll be a very good team.
I agree with you. I didn't watch a lot of the Panthers last year because I couldn't stand watching the offensive side of it. But when I went back and studied the defense, I didn't realize quite how bad they were at stopping the run. And it's the modern NFL, right? And who cares about stopping the run? It's sort of a secondary thing because you win through the air. And you look at the Panthers from last year and go, oh my God, it totally dive bombed the whole defense. They just couldn't do anything because they were getting run over between the tackles. So back in the draft, I was shocked when they picked, what's his name? Big nose tackle.
Derrick Brown.
Yeah.
Derrick Brown. Yeah. All I can think of was Derrick Henry because they're basically the same shape. Anyway, I was surprised by that. I thought Isaiah Simmons made a ton of sense after Kuechly retired. But then I went back through it and I was thinking, maybe I don't think that, we sucked against the run. We'll get a big nose tackle in. But I can see what they did. And if you look at all their draft picks, I think they've understood they could not do the basic foundation of defensive football. And they said, let's try and fix that there. And then we'll build on that. Whether that happens or not, interesting to watch.
Yeah, the offense, I think, will be exciting. It'll be fun. Matt Rhule, innovative college coach, really good at building the culture, which I think is the big thing that David Tepper, the owner, wants to see there. But clearly, they kind of examined the landscape of that team and said, we've got to completely rebuild this defense from the ground up. I mean, all 7 picks on the defensive side of the ball, no no questioning what their plan is for rebuilding this team.
Passed
So,
on the double M, but got the double N.
hold on, what?
Passed on Simmons and got Chinn.
Oh man, there you go, Adam. We were talking about the
That's what you're gonna get at the Big 3 IDP.
Good Lord,
Only here.
That was
only
good.
here. That was good.
Thank
We're
you.
proud of you, Addy.
Proper
I could-
Kentucky skills there.
Yeah, I can see the wheels.
I'll tell you who's
turning.
going to turn the Panthers defense around. F.A. Abada, London's own F.A. Abada.
That's right.
Big fan. Lovely
I
guy.
know. Let's go.
I really want him to get a chance.
Yeah, I loved it. His story on All or Nothing, the season with the Panthers, was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I watched
Yeah,
that the other
amazing
day,
guy.
and that was a great show. I love the Kuechly stuff in there. You know, the young Shaq Thompson, the teaching that Kuechly did with Shaq Thompson, especially on the field, was pretty fun to watch. And now it's obviously Shaq's team. So, man, I'm buying high on Shaq this year. I don't know whether that's smart or not, Tom, but hey, I'm a believer. A lot of tackles missed there.
Yeah, you lose Eric Reed, you lose Luke Kuechly. I mean, somebody's got to make the tackles.
I mean, it doesn't look great, does it? There's a fair amount of talent on the line. K1 Short's there still. Everyone's sort of forgotten how good he was. Derrick Brown, we already talked about. The edge is sort of deep. I don't think there's a complete player there, but there's a lot of talent. And then you get past Shaq Thompson, you go, Tahir, Whitehead, Jermaine Carter. I see very little at corner. Jeremy Chinn, yeah, he's exciting. I like him, but Trey Boston. Trey Boston, everyone thinks is great because he's got long dreads, right? And the holy grail of thinking defensive players are good. If you get drafted in the first round, if you've got a cool name, and if you've got dreads. So he's got
if you throw a visor in there,
NFL.
just taking him for the Hall of Fame if he threw a visor.
Checking a lot of boxes for me, Tom.
I know, the tattoos, the name, the dreads. He's got the drip, as we like to say.
Sure.
So let's kind of zoom out here. I love obviously the player takes here, but let's talk about the implications of this season and coronavirus, Tom. And we mentioned all these guys opting out, and we really have no idea what's going to happen as we get more and more involved in kind of the contact part of the sport. But as a football fan, how do you deal with the fact that your favorite sport is proceeding forward despite this real and present threat that is making professional athletes, this is their job, this is what they love to do, it's making them choose to stay away from the game? How do you deal with that as a fan?
Yeah, there's a moral aspect to this, isn't there? And we're sort of used to it given concussions in particular and the injury effects on people. But as a fan, I'm selfishly quite happy because it is such a long off season and it's hard. And someone that really loves football, we get excited every year. Football's coming back and there is sort of things happening, sort of. So I think that's great. But if it was me, if it was my family involved, if my best buddy was an NFL player and he was phoning me up and saying, I'm not sure what to do, what do you think? I'd probably say, is it really worth the risk to go and do that? I'm not sure it is. So we're in tough times. I tend to try and disassociate myself from that, but that's only so you can get through it. I'm doing a thing at the moment on sort of how sport is changing for my day job. And there's a lot of studies going around at the moment in psychological and psychiatric space that say hobbies are brilliant for people's well-being. They just make themselves feel better. There's a big argument about whether people with hobbies are happier or whether hobbies make people happier. And I don't know, but sport either way comes up huge on that one. And people that do like sport and have a sport to follow, there's a big difference from when everything was shut down a couple of months ago. And then, over here in Europe, obviously we have soccer, it's a bit bigger and it's back and things happening. The FA Cup final happened today. Boo, Arsenal won it, dirty Gooners. But it makes people happy. I sort of thought that sport was going to come back and people would get really excited about it and then it would fade because it was pretty much football every day and it felt like too much and it wasn't special. But no, interest stayed really high and people are just excited, and I think it did fill a massive hole. So two ways you can do it is either on an individual level. I totally see massive problems with football, and people are going to get ill, people are going to get sick, and then people who are not professional football players will probably get ill off the back of that, and that's a problem. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of people who will find their tough circumstances. A lot of people lost their job and are struggling, who will be made a little bit happier by football. So I don't know. I can't say yes or no. I just think it's a seriously tough situation for everybody.
It's a true kind of moral quandary of I don't think there's a right answer because there is such societal benefit to sports and there's also benefit to the athletes and the coaches to get out there. Imagine not being able to do the job that you love because of this whole thing. That would suck. That'd take a huge personal toll on you. The thing that I think we may have talked about a little bit with Sigmund Bloom or one of the other podcasts that we did, what is going to happen when the first coach, I think it will probably be a coach just because coaches are older. They don't tend to take care of themselves as well. They're at a little higher risk. But what happens when the first coach or player goes on a ventilator? What are we going to do? What is our collective NFL, fandom? What's our reaction going to be? We don't have to answer that question right now because we're not at that place yet. But that's, I think, going to be the turning point for whether we get through the season. Will be what is the reaction like when that happens? Because I hope it doesn't happen, but it just seems very likely, given how many people are involved with the NFL, that it will. So we'll see. So some sticky kind of moral issues to deal with. But what about fantasy? How is this impacting? Let's talk fantasy. All this hard stuff we don't have to soldier through right now. The fantasy implications. How is this affecting your 2020 strategy, Tom?
The more I think about this, the more I think it sort of favors the way I play anyway, because the way I build my teams is deep. I'm a big believer in anti-fragility and depth and all that sort of stuff. So my starting point is that players don't stay healthy. All players get hurt. The average is missing somewhere between 2 and 4 games a year, something like that. And if you do have a guy, some running back that stays healthy for 16 games, then brilliant. It's worked out really well for you. You've got lucky and that's happened. But I don't think you can rely on that this year as much as you normally do, because you've got the normal injury risk, and you've also got, as soon as you get a positive test, and that's going to happen, we've talked about that to a bunch of players, you're out for 3 weeks. So you're gone. So we're going to see far more backups play, and the general quality is going to be lower. So the thing that I think is most important this year, actually 2 things, sorry. One, build your rosters with a lot of depth. I don't want studs and duds team. I don't want nobody there because I've got Christian McCaffrey, he's going to carry me to a title, because Christian McCaffrey is probably going to miss 3 or 4 games this year, and they might come at really bad times or more, or who knows. Bad example, but any given player is probably going to miss more. And after that, it's just watching the waiver wire. So the thing that I do most in season is just track playing time, because playing time for defensive players is the biggest indicator by far of quality and production, anything else. It's ridiculously better than anything else. So I do that. And even on the offensive side as well, it's fantastic for running backs. I think it's number 2 indicator for running backs. It snaps above touches. It's so indicative, it's untrue. Same thing for quarterback is really true. It's less true for tight end and wide receiver. But I will be glued to snaps every week, working out who's changed and who's on the field and who's not, and trying to make decisions based on that. Because I think whoever wins the league this year is going to be the best person at making waiver moves. And the best person at minimizing 0 weeks, because 0 weeks is just going to kill you this year, and there's going to be more than ever. In IDP, we're used to that anyway, because we're starting 20, 25 players or whatever a week, and that can go horribly wrong, but it's going to go badly wrong this year. So you're going to have to be paying attention every Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 2 big takeaways I've had, and this is not my original take here, but something I've tried to been thinking about is, number 1, I think, save your fab. Like, if you have a free agent budget, save it. Don't go blowing $50 on the week 1 running back that pops. Try to save that money because you're going to need it later in the season. We have an auction draft, Tom, on the RSO platform, and it's a salary cap league. And so I'm sitting here trying to formulate my auction strategy of, should I spend all my available salary cap, or should I maybe get a couple guys and keep about 20 million in the bank to be able to grab these guys off waivers? I mean, these are the questions that you need to be asking yourself. And then I've heard it said elsewhere as well, this whole environment is going to favor teams with continuity. So if I'm looking at, and I'm not using it necessarily as like my number 1 thing I'm looking at as far as criteria, but I'm definitely looking at it as something that's worth tracking, and definitely as a tiebreaker. If I'm deciding between 2 players, I want guys on teams that have continuity with coaching staff, with quarterback, because I think those are going to be the teams that are going to be the least affected by no training camp, no preseason. I mean, September is going to look like not even the preseason. It's going to look like training camp. I mean, we're going to have guys popping hammies. We're going to have really poor play. We're going to have terrible officiating. So, yeah, I'm trying to shoot for continuity and keep those fab dollars available.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know which defense scares me? The Lions. Because the Lions have made quite a few changes from a really bad team. So it's not like the continuity they had was working. It was going badly. They were a bottom 3 defense last year, and they've totally changed the secondary. And they've made some big changes on the defensive line as well. So I think that could be pretty bad. The offense might be really good. So who knows? Maybe Matt Patricia keeps his job and it works out. But I think it's going to be a rough defense.
I think so too. Bobby, what about you?
Yeah, I play fantasy baseball. I did it this year for the first time in the last 5 years, and a weekend, and I'm like, man, this is a massive mistake. But the thing that I have learned a weekend is basically that I think I want the least amount of players on the same team. So I've got several Philadelphia Phillies right now. I've got several Miami Marlins, and all of them are basically postponed for a week or two, or they just bust 20 of the Miami Marlins back to Miami from like somewhere up north. 20 people who actually have an active, positive case right now. So I agree with Tom. Depth is going to be super, super important this year, but I don't think necessarily that it means that you want Avery Williamson and Blake Cashman. You might want Avery Williamson and Jelani Tavai, or I'm going to spread my depth. I'm going to try to diversify my assets as far as different teams, go as I can. And I think this is kind of what maybe Tom is getting back at with the snap count. But this might be the year that actual playing skill, talent matters maybe the least, and opportunity and snaps matter way, way more. Obviously, a CMC is going to be super valuable to have. If you can get a Darius Leonard, that's going to be pretty primo. But you're going to have a bunch of these trashy, just Blake Martinez, snap getters that are going to get 12, 14 tackles a game, and it might be an ugly win for you that week. But agree with Tom. Try to minimize as many zeros as you can.
And just get ready for a lot of those hold your nose and start 'em type players. I mean, we're gonna have guys winning championships in week 16 with Trent Richardson starting for like the Las Vegas Raiders or something insane.
I know you boys are telling me to save my fab. I won DeAndre Washington for about $200 this morning.
Did you really?
So I think he may be relevant at some point. I need him to be.
Yeah, you need him at this point to pay off that investment for sure. So
we talked about the Jets before, right? And I think a good way of thinking about it is the Jets linebackers last year. And we talked about 4 or 5 different players there. Remember there was a couple of weeks where Brandon Copeland had to play inside linebacker for the Jets? And that sort of thing is going to happen this year. Or the Jags are a good example. They started off and cycled through like 7 different linebackers. And then eventually Donald Payne sort of ended up the guy at the end of the year. But I agree with you. I mean, you made a really good point there, that the hold your nose. I think you're going to have to be making those gambles where you go, it looked like this guy got hurt last week and this fella's next, so I'll get him in and I'll start him. But it's a big gap. You're going to be wrong on a lot of them. You just need to be right more than your opponents.
Yeah, this is a year that's going to favor teams, again, with continuity and with really good leadership that can kind of push through the obstacles in the way to having a successful season. It's going to be the same way for fantasy too. Whoever is like plugged in, doing their homework. I think the casuals are going to get absolutely massacred this year.
Yeah,
in all their like redraft leagues and stuff.
Yeah, at the beginning we pumped up Williamson and Cashman and Hewitt. It's going to be Burgess and
Onwuasor.
Yeah,
probably
100%.
I mean, just know the depth charts. This is a great year to not go like real shallow with your depth chart analysis. Like dig into those practice squad guys. Those are going to be the guys come week 8 or 9 you're going to need to know about. So good year to stay flexible, stay water, and just take the punches as they come. Tom, one thing that I've really gotten a lot of benefit from over the past few years, we've done our main IDP league, is that you do in the past, you've done an IDP projection series. And then at the end of the year, at the end of the season, you've gone back and checked your predictions to see how you did. So I'm just curious, what kind of enduring lessons have you taken away from that exercise? And how have you applied those lessons to make you better at fantasy football?
Well, the first question is easier to answer. It made me humble That's the first thing.
Absolutely.
Because we are wrong a lot, especially in the defensive world, right? In offense, you're projecting half the number of players. We're doing twice as many defenders anyway. So the opportunities for you to mess things up are way bigger. And I think one of the problems in the IDP world is we give ourselves easy ticks. People go, I said this guy was going to be a top 36 linebacker and he was top 48. So I was right on him. That was a hit. And you go, is that useful analysis? Has it helped anyone? So
yeah, you're kind of stretching that.
Yeah, you gotta try and be honest, right? And see how close you actually were. And if he was, vaguely startable and you sort of liked him, that was good. The whole idea of I like him or I don't like him is just terrible. That shouldn't be how we analyze players, because you got 40 linebackers a week who are probably relevant for you. So it's taught me a lot. It's taught me humility and it's taught me honesty, but mostly it sort of told me which things are useful for predicting year to year and which ones are not. So when I first started, I used to use sacks. You had 15 sacks last year, so you'll probably have 15 sacks next year. And it's just not true. And I used to be wrong quite a lot. I was wrong I never saw the dark horses coming. So historically, I've been pretty bad at predicting the guys that get over, let's say, 13, 14 sacks, something like that. I mean, it's hard to see them coming anyway, because by definition, they are black swan events.
Yeah.
But I was particularly wrong with them. And once I shifted from using sacks to model to pressures, I got much better, because pressures is just way more indicative. The percentage of pressures that people convert into sacks is so variable and it's so wrong. And the easiest way to correct an IDP, in my humble opinion, is you look at guys that had a lot of sacks and not a lot of pressures, or a lot of pressures and not a lot of sacks, and assume it's going to regress. So last year, the example was, what's his name? Kyler Fackrell. You remember him in Green Bay in 2018? From memory, he had something like 24 pressures and 11 sacks. And the average is, maybe 20%, something like that. So 1 in 5, and he was like 45%. So obviously it didn't work. And he got nowhere near it last year. His pressure was probably about the same, but you didn't get it. And then you can do it the other way, and you can find lots of people who had a lot of pressure. So good example from last year is Olivier Vernon. I think he got hurt in week 9, and at the time he had something like 33, 35 pressures, and he was top 10 in the NFL, something like that amongst edge players. Check my numbers, I'm probably wrong. But he had like 2 sacks. So nobody thought Olivier Vernon was good. And this year everyone's like, they might they might cut him because he's earning loads of money. I like Vernon this year. I think he's going to come back and then be good. So I think that is a really, really easy way to make wins.
Yeah,
After that, I'd probably go for distribution.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, buddy.
No, I was just going to say, Adam, that's one thing you've been talking about a lot this offseason is pressure, because sacks it's kind of a lucky statistic. It's
right.
Did the quarterback maybe turn right into the sack, or was he mobile and able to escape, and you did everything you could, but you just didn't record that right. stat. But pressure is, I think, more indicative of pure performance on the defensive player
100%.
side.
The problem with me was just finding, sites that carried these stats. So, I mean, Pro Football Reference has them, but they're way different than what PFF has. So it's just finding the right sources. So that's kind of been a big Eureka thing for me. I've gotten a PFF sub, and that's kind of opened up a lot of doors. But yeah, pressures, snaps, those are the things you should be paying attention to.
Yep, 2 big things. Tom, you were talking about distribution as well, I think was the next thing you were going to bring up there.
Yeah, but let's go back to snaps, because I think snaps are the most important thing. So I was lucky enough to see this amazing German scientist last year, again for a day job thing, and he was amazing. He was talking about heuristics, and heuristics was sort of a word I sort of knew about, and if you'd asked me what they meant, I probably would have pretended I knew what it meant, but I didn't. Anyway, I think it's super relevant. So heuristics is basically the concept of rule of thumb rules that we sort of learn. So the classic example is, when there's a baseball in the air and you're running towards it to try and catch it, right? Now, theoretically, the calculation you'd have to do is how fast is the ball moving, how far away I am, how far am I running, what is the air resistance, all that sort of stuff to work out where to be in the right place to catch it. Of course, we don't do that because we're stupid and we can't do any of that. What we do, when you run towards a ball that's falling, if you run towards it and keep the angle of you facing the ball at the same angle, then you'll reach the floor at the same time. So you use this dirty little rule of thumb to make sure you get there. And there's all sorts of examples we use all the time, which are just quick, easy rule of thumbs that are mostly fine. And snaps is by far the best one. So the fantasy world, we tend to look at millions of stats and super deep, and we argue about whether yards per routes run is better than racer or all sorts of stuff. But actually, just look at how much players are playing, and you can make really, really good basis on that. So I think that's by far the most important thing. And just look last year, and you can see how much players play. And I don't worry about percentage. I sort of ignore percentage because it's easy to be a low percentage on a high snap team and play more snaps than a 100% on a low snap team. That happens all the time. Just go for players who are probably going to play a lot.
Yeah, look at the Cardinals. I mean, Budda Baker, who's the Jordan Hicks and Chandler Jones. All three of them, I think, were like the top of their position. Right,
Budda Baker led the NFL in solo tackles last year. You know, that's a 5'9" safety led the NFL. That's an amazing number.
Yeah, and Jordan Hicks, historically injured in Philadelphia, plays 100% of snaps. I mean, you talk about things that you can't see coming, and predicting the dark horse, guys that are going to get double-digit sacks. Shaq Barrett, anyone? I mean, who before this year? I don't even think Shaq Barrett's parents would have said my baby's going to get double-digit sacks. No way. It's just not going to happen.
But look at him going now. So the NFL 100 or top 100 or whichever version it was came out this week, and people are going, "Oh, shouldn't Shaq Barrett be in there?" And no, he had one good year, and he had a fair amount of pressure, to be fair to him. But D Ford before him, D Ford had that year where he, rushed the passer 600 times, and everyone suddenly went, "Oh, D Ford's amazing now." And I'm not sure that's true. It's played a lot now. That's useful for us because in the IDP world, you profit off that, and it's sort of the same thing. But you need to understand where it's different. Otherwise, you can't make sensible decisions.
Yeah, and Shaq Barrett was like top 40 on that list. I think.
Did he make the list?
Yes,
the top
he
100?
was like ahead of some serious pass rushers. Like I think he was like 32. I think
that seems very high.
He's crazy.
So JJ Watt's a good example. Last year JJ Watt's pressure was really good, but he had 4-5 sacks, something like that. And there's so many takes out there that JJ Watt's old and he's past it and he's fallen away. I bet you he's good this year.
Yep. Yeah, he had 16 sacks in 2018 and 4 in 2019.
Yeah, but he was up there in pressures. He still had like 50 plus pressures, I believe. So, and that was only in 8 games.
Yeah, because he was hurt.
I mean, look, this is why we do it, right? The nerds like us sort of pore over this stuff so you can recite these numbers. And there's probably people at home going, "Whoa, why are you spending that time on it?" Because you need to make snap decisions when the draft's on. You need to remember all that stuff because that's going to be important going forward. Mm-hmm. And we're just nerds and we like it.
That's right. It's fun to dig into. I think that's, we did an episode with the editor-in-chief for the Fantasy Footballers, and that's why Kyle, we were talking to him about why should he play IDP, and he did. He took the leap. We're very excited. He's in one of our listener leagues, and that's what we told him is, do you love digging into the nerdy stats on the offensive side of the ball? Well, guess what? Now you get to double that, and you get to unpack a whole new treasure chest of stats that are nerdy that you get to dig into. So it doesn't take away your enjoyment of digging into these like deep offensive sleepers. You just get twice as much now. It's great.
It's a good way of putting it. And, you've had the same conversation as I have probably a million times more about, IDP, and it's still treated as a weird splinter niche. And it shouldn't be. I just think the way Sticky talks about it is if you invented fantasy football today with all the data and all the information you've got, of course you'd use every player on the field. You would do, because it's supposed to represent football, not just football who carry the ball. But it's still seen as a weird little way forward. And you listen to offense podcasts and they talk about every player on this team like that is only skill positions, and they don't talk about offensive line. That seems weird.
Yeah. Speaking of the nerdy side of IDP, I have enjoyed, Tom, your little film sessions and your photographs of like backfields to see, where people are actually lining up, when the safeties are dropping down into the box, where the ends are actually playing, whether they're standing up or not. So, that's a little mini question. What have you learned? I don't know that you've ever done that as far as that much in depth in an off season, but what have you learned from doing stuff like that?
Well, look, here's a glimpse into my life, and thank you, by the way. So most of my football happens when I'm working in the office. I commute to work, right? And certainly my old job, I used to spend 2 hours on an air-conditioned train with a desk every day. So I'd write loads of football. But now you can see my office here. I'm sitting in the office, and I spend a lot of the time with the screen that you're on now, with conference calls happening. I'm sort of talking about day jobs and being very important. And the other one, I've got Game Pass on, and I'm taking photos of it. So you sort of cover the content that you can do using your life, right? So the way I look at football, it tends to be more analytical and based on numbers rather than that. But like anybody in our particular hobby, we spend a lot of time watching football. But because I didn't grow up with it, and maybe it's just my own personal deficiency or whatever, I'm not very good at decoding football in real time. I can watch the game, and I watch certain players doing things on certain games and try and see certain players, but I can't look at a play and go, well, this is exactly what happened, and this was who was where. I have to look back and check later. And I find whenever I do that, I actually realise that even though we talk about players doing one job and we talk about starting lineups and that sort of thing, actually players move around on defense in particular a lot more than we think, like way more than we think. Safeties in particular, it's still the most exciting position on the football field for me because it's fundamentally flexible. We call it safety because we think, safety lining up deep, and there is a difference between players who are called safeties and the actual position of lining up as deep safety, and that gets quite confusing. But they're moving around all over the place. The other one, we'll get into this, and I'm sure you can tell me why I'm wrong, the whole Mike and Will and Sam thing, just seems like an anachronism to me. It hasn't really described how players line up for 15 years. So it feels weird we do it. Greg Williams is a good example. And that press conference he did when he took over as the Jets, people said, you're going to run a 3-4 or a 4-3. And he went, I'm sort of both. Not really. I don't know, because he doesn't look at his defense as 11 players. He looks at I've got heavy package and this all these different packages, like 20 different words for personnel that he calls. And you can see it when you watch football. The classic example is the Patriots versus the Seahawks at Super Bowl, and you can see all the coaches signaling for the different plays, but just before the Malcolm Butler play went in, and they think about 20 different packages and that personnel thing and who they line up, not 11 different players and what they do and who's the Mike or who's the Will. So I think, I don't know this because I'm not close to football, and you probably are way closer to high school and college and NFL teams and know far more about it than I do. But I think we think about it in the wrong way. I think we think about it in terms of who are those 11 players and what is their job in that ideal base defense. And I don't think that's really representative of how defenses are put together. Well, that didn't really answer your question. Sorry.
I have an answer for you on this, Tom. And it sounds really silly, but I know this is true for me, and I bet you it's true for a lot of other football fans as well. It's Madden. It's how we have played Madden. That's how you construct your rosters, right? You have each position group, and there's like 11 of them, and you slot them all in there, and that's how we think about football. And you mentioned the Mike and the Will and the Sam. That's and hasn't been relevant for 15 years. But you mentioned earlier too, offensive fantasy football. That's because that's how it started. It gets dug in, it gets entrenched, it gets institutionalized to where that is what fantasy football is. Linebackers, when you describe them, it's Mike, Will, and Sam. Even if that's not the way it is anymore, it's just that's the way that the kind of new entrant or casual fan thinks about it, and we just haven't been able to, push them towards this more complex view of what reality is.
It is fascinating stuff. So when I was learning Madden, and this is probably, we're going back to 2000, 2002, somewhere like that. And I was sitting there in my student bedroom with a bed that was just a mattress on the floor, trying to teach myself Madden. And I was looking at my depth chart and my 4 linebackers. I was running a 3-4. I didn't even know what that was at the time. And it had LOLB and ROLB and LILB and RILB. I didn't know what they meant.
Yep.
and I couldn't even Google them because I didn't have a phone with the internet. And I was trying to work out what they meant. And I just had no idea. And you're right. That probably formed a lot of opinion. So we talk about safeties, right? And everyone talks about safeties, and you're either a strong safety or a free safety. And there's so many teams that just don't do that. So the Raiders is a classic example. Paul Gunter is the coordinator who all those years in Cincinnati delivered terrible safeties because none of them played in the box. They just moved all around. And then they drafted John Abram last year, and everyone went, he's a box banger. And we talked about it at the time. I'm not sure he is a good fit for that scheme. I mean, yes, they're far smarter people than me. I'm sure they've got way more plans for it. It's not like they didn't realize this, but he is a box safety that plays in a 2-deep safety scheme, and that's a problem for me. It's certainly a red flag from an IDP point of view. You go, do I want to invest in this guy that might work out, might not? Don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where you're taking them. We've mentioned a few things here, Tom. Getting into our next question about popular fantasy football opinions. This is hot take season. Everyone's trying to like stir the pot and get the follows up and get the eyeballs on their stuff. Is there a fantasy football take out there that you've seen popular, maybe more, kind of smaller under the radar take that's gaining popularity? Is there just something out there that you flat out disagree with?
I really want to fight on a few of these. So I'm going to say two different things, and one of them is a throwaway. So one of them is this idea that the offense and defense is sort of a seesaw. And if you have good offense, then your defense will play less and vice versa. That's just wrong. There is no link between offensive snaps and defensive snaps. You can easily be high volume on both. You can easily be low volume on both. Chargers last year were bottom in the league in total snaps, and they were low pace on both those. So I think that's wrong. Let's talk about that in a sec. But the other one is rookie cornerbacks, which I always come back to. And rookie cornerbacks is fascinating. So certainly when I came into IDP, I mean, my first ever superstar in IDP in the late 90s was Dwayne Washington, who was sort of a cornerback safety hybrid. And he piled up the tackles, right? He wasn't even a rookie, but whatever. People are convinced that you get rookie cornerbacks. And I just think it's wrong. I think it's confirmation bias, because you look at cornerbacks, top 12, top 24 rookie every year, and you go, well, in the top 12, there's probably 3 or 4 rookies. In the top 24, there's probably 6 or 8. So rookie cornerbacks tend to score well. Actually, it's just indicative of how many rookies are playing, because the NFL rinses young cornerbacks. They get through so many on a first contract and then just let them go, because cornerbacks, well, my outtake for this, I don't know this, my logical conclusion is cornerbacks are pretty good when they're 23 and 24, because you can just get a fast guy in who can sort of cover people. And actually the amount you've got to pay some bloke who's 26 who wants a big fat contract is probably not worth just getting another guy in for 200 grand a year that you can pick up as a UDFA. Anyway, bit of assumption there, but rookie cornerbacks on a per snap basis, I do not believe are massively more effective. Tell me if you disagree, because a lot of people in IDP still do.
I just hear him saying that the Rams don't need to pay Jalen Ramsey.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Hello, Jalen Ramsey. It's like, and it sucks. It's kind of like the running back equivalent for the defense of the NFL is just going to cycle through these guys. And it kind of sucks if you're a cornerback, because by the time you figure out how to play your position, you are at a point where you're replaceable, or your speed and your physical skills have diminished enough to where these speedy wide receivers are passing you by. So yeah, we'll just go get another fast rookie and plug in here for the league minimum salary.
It's still worth investing in elite corners sometimes. If you have got a Stephon Gilmore, right? So we talk about coaches and GMs who are clever. Bill Belichick has forgotten more about football than I'll ever know today, let alone the rest of his life. And he thought Stephon Gilmore was worth all that money, and he was right. I don't think he was MVP or Defensive Player of the Year last year, but he was clearly brilliant. It was the best defense in the league. So you can get it right. The worry is you can easily get it wrong. We can all think of examples where a cornerback has been paid big money and never been close to worth it as well. So I think there is an elite core of cornerbacks who are clearly worth paying a huge amount of money, and there's a load of guys who are replaceable. And I don't think there's as many guys in the middle as there are in other positions.
Yeah, the key is just to draft them, when they're rookies, and hope that they're elite immediately.
Yeah,
easy enough. Interesting thing this year. So 2020 is going to be really difficult for cornerback. So in more one-shot positions, and you sort of get a guy and you've got someone ready to step up if he gets hurt. And cornerback, when you're often using 4 or 5 every single week, and then a couple of them get COVID and are out for 3 weeks, that's going to be a massive change to your defense.
Yeah, I just see this year being a lot of Greg Wards being called up. The Eagles wide receiving core from 2019 is basically what 2020 is going to be like for both sides of the ball.
Look like that's scary. Yeah, Boston Scott and Greg Ward,
it's going to be
skill position players.
It's going to be 16 weeks of the preseason is what it's going to be.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, do you remember Miami? Oh, obviously you remember Miami last year, but in particular their defensive backs. It is laughable. So here's my quiz question: how many different cornerbacks did the Dolphins give defensive snaps to last year?
Oh wow, jeez,
just number of cornerbacks.
Oh man,
10.
Yeah, probably.
14. They played
Oh,
14 different cornerbacks. So listen audio, the worst thing. But let's go through them. So Eric Rowe, Xavier Howard, Jamal Wilkes, Chris Lammons, who the hell is he? Xavier Crawford, Nick Needham, people think he's good. Marcus Sherrills, Johnson Badamosi, Ryan Lewis, Ken Crawley, Tay Hayes, who? Lyndon Stevens, Nate Brooks, Ken Webster. I mean, I've talked about these and written about these guys, and I've never
Tom made half those guys up.
Right. I mean, who's Tay Hayes? He played 107 snaps in the last 2 games of the Dolphins season.
He just snuck in off. He snuck in off out of the crowd. They just like threw a jersey on him and snuck him in there. that guy's a fan.
If I believe there was anybody in the Dolphins crowd last year, I could see that happening, but it was empty.
Maybe.
So I think we're going to see a lot of teams end up with situations like that, and cornerback in particular, where you're just having to find new guys every week. And then the opposite of that was, I think the Bears last year basically had no one hurt for the whole year. Yeah, let's check. They only used 6 different cornerbacks, and 3 of those guys played less than about 100 snaps.
Wow.
So that's what you want. Obviously, continuity is fantastic. You look at all the great defenses, the Patriots last year, the Jags from 2 years ago, everyone was healthy all year long. If the Bears the year before. But I just think we're not going to see that. And possibly the biggest risk reward placed on defense is cornerback, right? Your star pass rusher is out, fine. You lose out on maybe 3 or 4 pressures a week and maybe a sack or 2. You lose your good cornerback, and your third cornerback's out, and you've got to start some street guy. You might give up 2 long touchdowns. That's a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, Bobby, before we move to the next question, should the Rams lock up Jalen Ramsey long term? You guys have $5 million in cap space right now.
I don't think you can.
I think a little bit of a hot take might be that Aaron Donald might not be on the Rams forever. There's you obviously, when you have cap problems, you look at the biggest problem first, and the biggest problem is probably Aaron Donald, maybe Jared Goff second. Aaron Donald is getting up there a bit in age. There's a lot of teams that would probably love to have him. I don't know. I don't see Aaron Donald maybe finishing on the Rams in 2020, 2021, possibly. But no, the answer to that question is don't pay Jalen Ramsey. I know you gave a first to get him. You got a half of a year out of him, but it's just what a terribly run organization right now.
Hey, what does Aaron Donald fetch? Jamal Adams just got 2 firsts. What's Aaron Donald getting?
Man, could
6,
he get
6 firsts?
Could he get 3 firsts? I think that could happen. Absolutely. Hey, Bobby, you guys could cut him this offseason for a cool $60.8 million in dead cap. I mean, that sounds feasible, right?
I mean, if there's a year to just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it, why would 2020 not be that year?
Just rip the Band-Aid off, and it takes all your skin with it as well. So let's
that Rams defense looks. I mean,
Tom, we're not going to get on this topic. We're going to move on, John.
Sorry. When your best edge rusher is Leonard Floyd, that is worrying.
Hey, amen.
Those linebackers, my God.
How do you take Cam Akers with your first pick in the draft?
Guys.
If you have a committee backfield. Yeah, they're 4 deep. John Kelly just got woken up off the park bench where he's sleeping.
Yeah, that was my favorite part of this week, was just that John Kelly was like, wait a minute, I'm relevant again, guys. Here we go.
Just got a phone call. Just woke up on a couch somewhere.
Awesome.
So, let's actually dig into some players now, Tom. We've talked sort of like big picture, macro viewpoint, but IDP players, they love hearing us talk about the guys that are actually playing out there on Sundays. So it's draft season. We've all got drafts going on right now. So I'm curious which IDPs you have found yourself targeting the most in your drafts. This could be because you really like them and you want to get a share of that guy, or maybe they're falling to the point where they're a huge value and you just can't pass them up. So who do you find yourself leaving your draft with more often than not?
So I looked at this by position and sort of said, look, who do I think is a good value there? Because the people I'm going for is whoever gets picked last. Because I'm always looking for value there. But a defensive tackle, a guy I think is getting a bit underappreciated, is Geno Atkins. People have sort of got bored of Geno Atkins and forgotten that he's one of the better interior pass rushers. Could have talked about Kawann Short. He was hurt last year and everyone sort of forgot him as well. Still really, really good player. I mean, even 2 years ago, Geno Atkins and Kawann Short were elite interior pass rushers. Not maybe Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox, but not too far behind them. So I like those guys. In leagues that reward tackles a bit more, I'm probably looking at Danny Shelton and Lawrence Guy. I want teams that play sides defensive tackles rather than a 3-tech under tackle and a nose tackle. And I think Shelton and Guy are really good. Does Matt Ioannidis count? Maybe. I mean, people are quite high on him after he was so good last year, but those are probably defensive tackles. Let's do it by position. Here we go. So on the edge, here is a couple of names. We already talked about Olivier Vernon. I like him a lot. I think he's really good value at the moment. Aside from that, I'm going to say Trey Flowers and DeMarcus Lawrence. So going back to pressure, 2 players that people think were really bad last year. Certainly Lions fans. Trey Flowers is terrible. We spent all this money on him. I think he's a good player. I think he was good last year as well. I think he's in a bad system, but he's still a good player. He's just never going to have 15 sacks, right? It's not who he is. I think he's still useful. And then the other one is DeMarcus Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence had about as much pressure as he did last year in 2018. Just didn't have the sacks. So in 2018, he had 66 pressures. 2019, 56, so 10 fewer, but less than about half one a game. And he went from 13 sacks to 6 sacks. And the difference in that is people have gone, well, I'm not having him. He was really bad last year. I'm not sure he was. So I like that. What do you reckon about those guys? Are they red flags or are they?
No,
those are right up our alley.
2 guys I've got. I think both the defensive ends you mentioned in my top 12 as far as redraft ranks are concerned.
Right. Olivier Vernon's pretty much going undrafted, and I think in our listener league draft he went undrafted.
Wow.
But we only start 9 IDPs, but still, that's someone that's probably going to have a decent bounce back.
I think he's fantastic value at that. So there you go. Sort of 2 different ranges, right? We've got DeMarcus Lawrence and Trey Flowers, and you can sit there and go, well, obviously they're pretty good, but I don't think they're being drafted as top 6. No. They're certainly outside of that range of the top 5 or 6 guys who are truly elite. Your Bosas and your Daniel Hunters and your Myles Garretts. Fine, no problem. But I think they're definitely in that next 6, and I'm not sure they're being valued at the moment in a lot of the drafts I see.
There tends to be like 2 classes, right, of guys that become values. It's dudes that had a bad year and people just say, oh, these guys must suck now. And also guys that we just get kind of bored with, right? Like, or that have unfortunate injury luck. Geno Atkins has been great, but there's all these sexy new defensive tackles that we want to stack up in front of this guy. So there's different reasons why guys become values, but you have to keep an eye out on both. Bob, what were you going to say?
I was going to say you went out and bought DeMarcus Lawrence this week there, Joshy.
I did. I acquired. So I had a pretty nice defensive end set up in our RSO league with Brandon Graham, Justin Houston, and Maxx Crosby as my top 3. But I really wanted to get someone in there. I'm high on Maxx Crosby, Tom. I don't know where you're coming down on Crosby this year. I know he seems to be a pretty divisive guy in terms of what IDP analysts think. But I said, okay, right now he's kind of my number 2. But if he can be my number 3 and I can get DeMarcus Lawrence in there as the 1 or 2 and Crosby's my 3 with top 12 upside, I like that a lot better. So I went and acquired DeMarcus Lawrence. But where are you coming down since we brought him up? Crosby kind of, really popped last year. Mike Woolard, I know, has been talking that he's maybe off of him for 2020. Where are you coming down on Mad Max?
Yeah, I'm closer to Mike, unfortunately. I thought Crosby was good. I thought he had a good year. I thought he is not as good as people think he is. He's getting drafted as sort of top 15, top 18 defensive end. And top I'm 12, not sure I believe in him.
Yes.
Now, we've all said that snaps is key. And clearly down the stretch, the Raiders believed in him and he was out there every single snap. He was playing a huge amount. What's his? Average 54 snaps per week from week 7 onwards. So crazy amount. And if he's out there that much this year, he's going to be good again. So I'm really happy with that. I'm not sure he's as good a player as everyone thinks he is because he's new and exciting and he's got X's in his name.
The double X. If it was just 1 X, I promise you people would not be as excited.
That's so sick.
It is a cool name. I like to call him Triple X Max because that sounds good.
He should be played by Vin Diesel, right? Like in the Maxx Crosby movie, it's going to be Vin Diesel.
He should be. I like the way you put it, though. If he's your 3rd choice defensive end, I am really happy with that. If he's your number 2, I'm feeling less confident with that. So I'm pretty much there.
Yeah, someone that's great to play against like bad matchups. Because I know last year he had 4 sacks against
The Bengals.
Right.
Yeah, that was a.
And
It was
they had
like
an awful.
yeah, it was like a
O-line.
45, 50-point week probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just looking. I've got him as defensive end 23 at the moment, which might be a little bit low. I've got 750 snaps against him, sort of 55 pressures, 8 sacks, maybe 9 sacks might get there. I'm pretty useful, pretty good, top 24, and I'm really happy with that. Fantastic value for where the Raiders got him. But the Raiders are still not a good pass rush team. In 2018, they were far and away the worst pass rush team. The stat from back then was if the 2018 Raiders had added JJ Watt and all of his pressures, they still would have been the last pass rush team in the league.
That's
So
very bad.
they went up last year. I think they were 25th, 26th, something like that. So clearly improvement and clearly much better, but they're still a bad pass rush team. And past those top 2 guys, I like Cleveland Ferrell to sort of come back a little bit. There's not a lot else there. Carl Nassib is there.
Yeah. Hurst, I think he's decent.
Maurice Hurst.
I think you're just, if you like that team, you're banking on them to take a step forward because they do have a lot of young guys. They're a young team, so I mean we could see those guys get better and better.
Completely remade offensive skill position guys. I mean, yeah,
2 new linebackers in there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the key thing for me is now maybe they don't have to worry about stopping the run as much with Kwiatkowski and with Corey Littleton, so maybe they can focus on those pressures just a bit more. But yeah, the Raiders should be fun to watch for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, I'm sure you've seen it as well when you get questions and DMs and stuff. Linebacker is still the most popular position for IDP players. So let's talk about linebackers. Who are the guys that you find yourself targeting in your drafts?
All right. So first off, Matt Milano. Big fan of Matt Milano here. So Bob, let's go back to a question earlier. And sort of Mike, Will, and Sam. One of the big trends that I see in the NFL is sort of opposite to what we think. We tend to call mobile coverage linebackers wills, and actually, the more and more I look at it, the more they're lining up on the strong side because teams are taking their more mobile linebacker or their strong safety and put them over the tight end. So they're more on the tight end because tight end is a receiving role now and not a run blocking role. And Matt Milano plays more on the strong side than Tremaine Edmonds does, which is weird. But I really like Matt Milano. I see everyone's into Tremaine Edmonds. Me too. I think he's top 8 linebacker as an IDP. But I don't know that he's massively miles ahead of Matt Milano. I think Matt Milano could easily be a top 20 linebacker as well. I think he's a really good player. He's very good in coverage. That's what I target most of all. And he seems to be a little bit undervalued. So big fan of him. Second guy I'm going to say is Joe Schobert. So you just mentioned, people that were injured or not very good last year. Everyone sort of thinks they're bad. Joe Schobert's been hurt for 2 years in a row. So now people think he can't stay healthy or however you say it, or he's not very good anymore. I think Joe Schobert's really good. So I'll take that. And after that, 2 players who are a bit deeper. I've gone for Davion Taylor, the Eagles linebacker. I'm not sure he starts the year, especially not with COVID and difficult rookie situations and all that sort of stuff. But I think he'll be one of those 2 Eagle linebackers by the end of the year. And I think he's really exciting going forward. And the other guy who I hate myself for saying is Foye Oluokun in Atlanta, who I don't think is that good. But he's probably better than Michael Walker. We've talked about rookies having a hard job. Deion Jones is obviously one of those. And then there's this big hole next to him. And I think Oluokun's in line for the job at the moment. So I like him at the start of the year.
Yeah, he's a great post-hype sleeper. I know I had a lot of Oluokun last year thinking, oh, this is going to be the guy. He's going to have the opportunity. You still had Devondre Campbell there, the vampire taking all the tackles. Yep. Tom, you mentioned Joe Schobert being hurt. Were you talking about Christian Kirksey as far as missing the last 2 seasons? Or...
Yes, you're right. I got my Browns mixed up there. So apologies.
I know we love Matt Milano.
I mean, Milano's a guy that we are all very high on. Is extremely handsome.
Yes,
it stops right there. That's the only reason. But I know Christian Kirksey. He's
and the cookies,
Josh. Yes, and the Bobby loves Milano cookies as well.
Absolutely.
So, but Eddie, I know you really high on Christian Kirksey this year.
Oh yeah, Kirksey, man. I think he's gonna, and I think Tom is too. I believe Tom had him in the top 10. I think I may have him like 14, but that's that's just the injury concern. I think that if he plays, if he doesn't miss any games, he's going to be a top 10 linebacker this year. Love him.
Yeah, those are great, Tom. I really enjoy that as well. The Milano take I know we're really big on, especially with you look at their defensive line. Ed Oliver's sitting out for a couple games now because of
the lawsuit got dropped.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't know. He may still get a suspension, but since it was dropped, I'm not anticipating any kind of missed games for him.
Okay. Well, either way, Jordan Phillips is gone as well. We all like Matt Milano. The Joe Schobert take is interesting. It'll be fun to see how Miles Jack looks, moving back outside and everything. Davion Taylor, that's not somebody we've talked about a ton. I know everybody's huge on the, Willie Gay, Isaiah Simmons, Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen, but, Davion Taylor's a sneaky little rookie. Why? I guess, obviously, Jatavis is nothing, but there's not a whole lot of people there in front of him. Sorry, apologies.
That hurt his heart right there.
So I'm slightly higher on rookie linebackers has gone up for me. So for the last 2 or 3 years, really, I've sort of shied away from rookie linebackers. I didn't think we were going to walk into an immediate job. Jermaine Pratt was an example last year. I didn't see him winning that job in week 1, so I thought no point carrying a linebacker who won't. And then a couple of weeks ago, I looked back at how much rookie linebackers play, and I looked at rookie linebackers who play at least 500 snaps a year. So basically, starting half the games or whatever. And it was something like 14, the average. It was way higher than I thought. So I'm thinking, if I look at linebackers and think it's only those 4 or 5 guys at the top that walk into an obvious job, that's not enough, because there's going to be another 6, 7, 8, 10 of them who end up having a job by the end of the year. And I think someone like Taylor is very primed to be one of those guys. So you're probably going to have to bite the bullet and sit there watching him not play for a few weeks, but he's likely to have a job.
The Oluokun take is interesting too, because Deion Buchanan is nothing. I don't think Tom's a big Buchanan fan, but especially in sleeper, Oluokun is he's a little cheat code because he's the LB and the DB designation as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Bobby, who's your
But
guy?
still
there?
not change that.
Yeah, I know.
Do you play sleeper, Tom? You have any sleeper leagues?
No, I don't. I do with a work league, but primarily not for IDB, because they always do things like this. They sort of make decisions based on what someone did in college and never change it. So Oluokun has been in the NFL for a while now. It's probably time to realize.
Quincy Williams
comes
also
back to
had
question.
DB.
That's so weird. Like he's not getting any run there. Like, why is he a DB?
He was in college for a year.
I guess that's weird though.
Who knows? And maybe they have a different definition to what I do of where a safety becomes a linebacker. And obviously, it's entirely interpretive, so we've got no idea. But
I just don't know why you can't. I think you can do this in my MFL leagues, that you can change players' positions. Like, why don't we just make that the standard?
Yeah.
Offensive, you don't have to really worry about this unless you got Jalen Samuels, some tomfoolery there with tight end versus running back designations. But it doesn't tend to happen on the offensive side. For defense, just let us change the position, Like, we're in the Reality Sports Online League, and they just have one positional designation, and they do D tackle, D end, linebacker, safety, cornerback. Most of the time they get it right, but there are definitely some guys that we would love to be able to switch over to other positions. Or, somebody like Zadarius Smith gets killed because he's listed as a linebacker.
Chandler Jones.
Yeah, a lot of these guys that
Bradley
should
Chubb.
have that kind of D end or edge designation are just getting killed, getting lumped in with these linebackers. So
We got a spot in Shark City if you want it, Tom. It's on sleeper. It may upset you though that the way they do
Let's
it.
talk. I may have a go. So on that subject, I'd love to hear your opinions, because no one ever answers this question. I don't know what the difference is between a defensive end and an outside linebacker. I think it used to be whether your hand was on the floor or not, but nobody ever sort of confirms that's what they think. So what do you guys think the difference is?
yeah, that would be my first thing. And then defensive end is this is probably totally wrong if you look at the statistics and how players are used, but I think about them being just constant pass rushers and OLBs maybe dropping back into coverage a little bit more. But again, that's how my brain thinks about it. Maybe totally off base. I don't know. Addy, have you kind of parsed this out?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about it, really.
Yeah, I haven't really given it much thought, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. A lot of people say something similar. Tend to have fairly strong opinions on whether one player is one thing or the other, and then you get quite close to it and go, well, what is this guy doing? Jadeveon Clowney is a good example, right? Because he lines up right on the line of scrimmage almost all the time, inside the tackle, over the tackle, but he always stands up. So I don't know. Is he different? I just find it really interesting that these are things we think we know, and actually there's no standard definition. So the other example is we talk about Europe, right? And everyone talks about continents. And sorry, this is totally off base, but it's interesting. I'm gonna force you through it. So people talk about Europe as a thing, as a continent, and you go, brilliant. What's continent? They go, well, it's a large mass of land surrounded by sea. And you go, brilliant. Where's the sea that is between Europe and Asia? There isn't one. It's thousands of miles of land. So anyway, random example, right? But I think edge is very similar. It's one of those things that everyone thinks they understand the official definition of, and then you look at it in detail and you go, oh, I don't know what it is actually. It's weird.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you talked about earlier too, Tom. Everybody thinks, well, this is a 3-4, this is a 4-3 defense. Well, really, I guess if you go back and look at the tape, is it? So maybe it's kind of it's rude of us to group everybody into this, box of LB or edge or whatever they are, because obviously we know every team is different.
Yeah, we don't care. We're just here to have fun.
That's right.
Give us the dual designation. Honestly, it makes things easier. Truly,
I don't care. I don't think we have
just call everyone on edge. So
that's
easy.
right. It's true. We don't have really blistering hot takes as far as no, this guy should be an OLB versus a D. We don't really care.
We've never been protesting for the edge stuff. We don't care. People do what you want, man.
Do what you want. We have our league that we like. We wouldn't want people coming in and telling us it's wrong. Just we're not going to tell you the same thing. Play it however you want. That's what makes fantasy fun.
We've got enough COVID problems this year. If they're just out there, we're doing well.
That's right. If they're on the field, we're doing great wherever they line up.
You're right. We probably need to find ways to get along a little bit more and not fall out.
That's true, especially this year. So let's wrap it up here. IDPs you're targeting. Let's talk about DBs. This will primarily be safeties, I assume, but maybe some cornerbacks thrown in the mix. Who are you looking at?
I know. Look, I love a cornerback, but I'm certainly not going to subject your listeners to talk about underrated cornerbacks. That is a bad way of doing it. So safeties, a couple of guys spring to mind for me. So Ronnie Harrison, we mentioned him earlier. I think Ronnie Harrison is that old school in the box, basically extra linebacker. Big fan of Ronnie Harrison. Also, do you remember when the Jags came to London a couple of years ago and some of the guys spent a night in the cell for falling out with a bouncer at a strip club? So Ronnie Harrison was there. But his name wasn't released to the press. So respect to Ronnie Harrison, because that was pretty cool. So big fan of him. Then you got Chuck Clark. So took over that sort of strong safety, although it's a bit more interchangeable role in Ravens last year. And everyone gets crazy about Jamal Adams and how much he rushes the passer. Chuck Clark rushed the passer more than Jamal Adams last year. I think that probably continues. So that's really exciting. And then after that, a couple of deeper guys. I've gone for Dion Bush. Who at the moment looks to be the obvious strong safety in Chicago. I'm not sure how long he holds that job, but he's sort of the only option at the moment. So I don't hate that. And then potentially real deep guy, it may work out, Raven Green in Green Bay. Remember the start of last year when he was basically playing in the box? Adrian Amos and him sort of chopped and changed a little bit, but Raven Green has a chance to be that sort of dime linebacker. So given that he's totally undrafted everywhere, he's only worth holding if you've got a ridiculously big roster. But I think he's worth owning in those leagues.
Yeah, a couple guys we haven't really talked about it all there. So appreciate you diving deep for those two. That was perfect. Those are the kind of gems that we were hoping Tom K would bring, and baby, you have delivered. So let's wrap up.
I'd go for Dion Bush. I think a lot of people should be signing Dion Bush that haven't at the moment.
Good name to keep in mind. You mentioned and talk about things we know that people love. And this is not just IDP players. People love rookies. We saw our, listens on the podcast shot through the roof around the NFL draft when most casual fans were checking back in. So let's wrap up here with some rookie talk, Tom. And you mentioned that there may be some rookie linebackers you're rising on. But with no training camp, no preseason, how are you approaching rookies in 2020? Are you staying away in your drafts, or are you rolling with the maybe handful of guys that you really like their opportunity?
So it goes back to looking at weekly waivers and snaps. I will be much more comfortable in season about going after rookies, but at the moment I'm pretty much trying to avoid them. So I sort of split it into two little lists and said, look, there's a couple of guys who are going to be instant hits, right? Players I would expect to play from week one and pretty much be full-time players and be really reliable, even given the problems. You got Chase Young on the edge for Washington Football Club. We actually got called them that. Or Washington Football Team, aren't they? Idiots.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's going to be really
dumb.
good. He's going to come in, he's going to play, and he's going to be awesome. So big fan there. You got Patrick Queen, Ravens linebacker. I see pretty much no way he doesn't walk into an instant job. Jeremy Chinn, we've already talked about, Panthers safety. Big fan there. Isaiah Simmons is going to have a full-time role, I think. Whether he's as effective as Jordan Hicks, I'm not sure, but he's worth gambling for. And then one of the guys who I weirdly feel strongly about at the moment is Darrell Taylor, Seahawks defensive end. So they picked him in the second round, and they lost so much of their edge talent last year. Jadeveon Clowney's gone. Ziggy Answer is gone. I mean, who knows if either of those come back. But at the moment, you look at the Seahawks and you go, Taylor has sort of got the inside track on that Leo job. So I think he's definitely worth a gamble. And then some players I like as being a little bit less confident about. Willie Gay, we talked about just now, Chiefs linebacker. I think he might have a hard adaptation, but they clearly don't believe in their existing linebackers. You've got Anthony Hitchens and Damian Wilson, who are terrible coverage players. I mean, they won the Super Bowl, so they're not that bad. But they really cannot play in space. So Willie Gay, it seems, was brought in to fill that hole. I expect that to happen pretty quickly. Yeshua Gross-Matos in Carolina, the edge player. I don't know about, so this is pretty nerdy. I was watching Gross-Matos around rookie season, and he had that weird stance, right? He had his one hand down, his legs so far out and sort of turn around. And I was watching Dietrich Wise, the Patriots defensive end, the other day, and he really looked similar to me. It's just one of those nerdy things I'm talking about for no reason. And then two other guys. I like Kenneth Murray, the Chargers linebacker. Now it's Chargers linebackers, right? And Gus Bradley is sort of not committed to anyone, but they traded up for him. It's in the first round, so I'm expecting him to be a full-time player at some point. And then the other really interesting wild card is Kyle Duggar. So I just think it's amazing. The Patriots took him so early. He was like, what, 39th overall choice or something crazy like that. And I think he might play a bit deeper to start off with, but they've lost so many other safeties. Patrick Chung's gone. Adrian Phillips is sort of guaranteed a full-time role at the moment. Joran Harmon's gone. Maybe McCourty plays a bit deeper. It seems like Kyle Duggar is probably going to be on the field a lot, and that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all those guys are rookies that we're high on. Great situations. Where, Tom, right now in your rankings, where do you have Chase Young for defensive lineman?
Good question. I probably got him a little bit disappointing because I look at that Washington team and think, well, you've got three good pass rushers, probably going to rotate a little bit. So I've got him, not that low. I've got him at 15th at the moment. So I've got him as 10 sacks as a rookie. Yeah. So for me, he's definitely in that top tier of talent we talked about earlier. You got both Bosa's, you got Daniel Hunter, you got Myles Garrett, and somebody else that I'm forgetting. Who knows? But it's somebody else there, and I think he'll definitely be part of that. And the last time I fell for this was when Myles Garrett, in his second year, was going to play for Greg Williams, who we talked about in Cleveland. And I went to that thinking, Greg Williams loves to rotate his defensive ends. I think he'll probably be looking at 600 snaps, maybe not a full-time player. And I think he led all edges in snaps that time, and I was wildly wrong. And he had a really good year. So I'm higher on Chase Young, and I'm getting higher by the day. So at the moment, I've got slightly less than 700 snaps for him, but I could easily add on an extra 100 for that and see him as a sort of bottom top 12 option.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where it's like, he's a rookie. He can't be that good off the bat. But it's like, well, he can be. We saw what Bosa did. We saw what Josh Allen did. Crosby. I mean, he really can come in right away and be the best piece on that defense by far.
That's kind of what I'm banking on. It is a little bit projecting, but we have seen, instant impact from some of these top tier. And I choose to believe, I think Chase Young is the cream of the crop in terms of those elite defensive ends coming into the league.
What's it do, Josh?
It rises, Adam. It rises. So just a little piece of breaking news here. Sorry to kind of pivot to the offensive side of the ball, but Matt Stafford just hit the COVID list.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that does not mean that they have coronavirus, as we know. It just means that they might have been exposed to someone, and so they're going to put him on that list, get him tested, make sure he's good. But
go get your Chase Daniels.
Yeah, there you go. Potentially, maybe. I guess it's good that he has it now. But, this is going to be the first quarterback to hit that list, and definitely not the last. So just wanted to sneak that piece of news in there. You were talking earlier about the Lions offense, Tom. Talk about a unit that we do not want to see without their starting quarterback. We had enough of that last year.
Yeah, David Blau wasn't very good at football. I'm
No, he
not
was
really
not.
a believer.
We had him on Thanksgiving, so everyone got to watch how great he was not. So,
I remember the other edge guy I was thinking, I always forget, TJ Watt. TJ Watt is
There
an
you go.
elite
Yes.
edge, and everyone always forgets him. Well, I do anyway, so sorry.
is he? Who's the better Watt brother right now? I think
TJ.
you think TJ is the guy right now?
TJ's the one.
Yeah,
That's a-
I
that's a
think you're
fun
right.
debate.
So
Yeah,
the question a year ago, we didn't know the answer was, who do you prefer on your team, both Bosa brothers or both Watt brothers? And it was quite close at the time, and now it's sort of the Bosas by a distance, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, JJ's holding up the rear, man.
Well, yeah, and it's just injuries. You know, he's kind of like I said, he's like Gronk. He's sort of got all of these different body parts
Right.
that have been injured. You know, back, forearm. You know, it's just like he's a Frankenstein monster at this point with how many different surgeries and operations that he's had. So you hate it because he's probably one of the best talents.
he's a freak.
Yeah,
He's a freak. Just not being around the bush.
Look at all those scars. But yeah, it is kind of tragic. You wish we could have gotten just more from him in the prime of his career. But hey, I agree. I think he's a nice bounce back candidate because he just didn't have the sacks last year.
Yeah.
So, all right, Tom. Well, we'll get you out of here on this. I want you to rack your brain and give me one guy that IDP players are not talking about that you think is primed. Let's just set the Corona stuff aside right now of like maybe this, you know, that can kind of submarine all of our takes, right? So just in an ideal world, what's one player that people aren't talking about that you think is primed for a big season in 2020?
Let's go for Titans linebacker Jayon Brown.
Ooh, yes, Tom, that's
Big
it
fan
right
of Jayon
there.
Brown here. We mentioned it briefly earlier that the number one thing I want from linebacker is ability to play in space. Because coverage snaps are A, lead to more snaps because you can be a full-time player, and B, they're more efficient for players anyway. I'm not a big fan of the Titans this year, but I think Jayon Brown is the top linebacker on that group. Everyone gets excited about Rashaan Evans because, you know, cool, memorable name, and he's a first-round draft pick. But Jayon Brown, I think, is the better player. Maybe not against the run. Certainly, Rashaan Evans can do things he can't, but Jayon Brown is probably going to be more consistent and better overall. So, top 24 linebacker, I'm pretty confident of. If he was top 12, wouldn't be shocked still.
2 thumbs up. That was one of the players, along with Ronnie Harrison, that we mentioned on the first episode, Tom. So you are checking all the boxes right now. So I appreciate that take. And I agree. I think he is the best Titans linebacker. So we'll get you out of here, Tom. Give us, we mentioned at the top of the show, but give us the details. Where can people find you on social media? Where can they find your work? And what's some stuff you have coming up here?
Yeah, so if you want to sort of argue with me about football or look at dorky charts, then you can find me mostly on the Twitters at Tom Kislingbury. I'm not going to spell my name because you can find it. One of the vast benefits of being the only Tom Kislingbury in the world is it's sort of my username everywhere and it's fairly easy to find. So have a search for that. And apart from that, I do all my writing at DLF. So I'm sort of working out how I can do preseason at the moment and starting to get into team previews, that sort of thing. The podcast is The Read and React. You can find it on Twitter at The Read and React, or just search for it on wherever you listen to good podcasts, and that's normally where we are. And apart from that, I'll sort of be cropping up and talking about football. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if we get a football season.
That's right. We're all fingers and toes crossed. Well, Tom, this has been great. Like I said, you were part of this journey really from day one. You know, I think this started as a podcast for our league. Like we said, we had maybe like 40 people listening to that for some reason, listening to a podcast about our fantasy football league with 12 guys in it. No idea why. So we decided to do that pod, and we thought, man, if we get 100 people to listen to it, we'll be thrilled. And with your help, we were able to blow past that with the first episode. So thank you, sir, for all your support. Thank you for what you've done to push the IDP industry forward. And thanks for coming on the show. This was a lot of fun.
No, the pleasure is all mine. It's been brilliant spending the evening talking about football. You guys put out really good content. It's a brilliant pod, and I definitely recommend everyone pays more attention to you. So I'm certainly a listener. I think everyone else should be as well. So thank you very much for giving me your time. I very much appreciate it.
Wow.
That's big right there.
Shoo-wee, Tom. Thank you.
Got to give you some Kentucky as we go out. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to this very special Saturday episode. We'll be back next Thursday with Kyle Borgononi from the Fantasy Footballers talking about his first IDP draft, his new DFS pod with Fantasy Footballers, and all of the stuff that we have coming up for this season. Be sure to tune in. Big things as always, Addy. It's going to be a lot of fun. The season's getting closer.
Hey, let's clip that thing that Tom just said.
You want to?
Let's do it on a loop.
Just play it on continuous. That could be the start to the show. I agree. All right. Y'all take care. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.